Yo, dudes and dudettes, what's going on with y'all? My buddy Dilo lended me a book series called Pellinor, the first one of which is called The Naming, which I am completely unfamiliar with, but he says it's really good and that he really likes it, so I figured, why not? Let's make a Chris Reads about it. So first off, this book kicks off with a very lovely detailed map on its inside cover, which I personally appreciate, that when books have made-up worlds, they have something like this. It's something I've always praised Lord of the Rings for and the Inheritance Cycle for, so I will also give this book props for it. So our story kicks off with a slave girl, Mayrad, who, just for the record, the book goes into a description of where she was enslaved. It took me a while to find it, and some back and forth, but I think I located the general area on the map. And it's truly amazing what a bit of understanding and context this sort of thing can provide the world with, truly. Anyway, she's held by a group or something called Gilman's Cot. Thane Gilman, who leads the place, is an asshole, if you didn't guess from already owning at least one slave girl, who is our protagonist. It's a bit lazy as an effort to make us hate a villain, but nevertheless effective. His wife had borne him 12 children, 7 of whom have died, and he beats his wife regularly, and this is all while extremely drunk. It sadly isn't uncommon during the medieval periods of history that I believe this is based off of. So, as Mayrad milks a cow, we learn that she's actually a very talented singer, though she despises most of the music she's forced to play, and why wouldn't she? Playing a small selection of songs over and over and over and over and over for someone you hate would be enough to make anyone hate their own art entirely. Anyway, as she's milking the cow's udders, she sees a man standing there who does not belong to the cot. This is odd because the man is magically hiding himself. He asks her about herself, and through some magical jiggery, she learns that Mayred's mother comes from a place called Pellinor, which I think from context is some sort of ye old bard college, because her mom was some sort of singer. Because Mayrad saw through this dude's magic, and because she's from a musical family, he wants to talk to her again, supposedly indicating that he would want to help free her. Wouldn't that be grand if you can sing or play a little bit, and someone instantly wants to whisk you off to a college? Ah, the world of fantasy. We also learn that, oddly, she does have some strange magical abilities she can use, such as cursing people with bad luck or blindness, or causing the animals under her to grow as she cares for them. Honestly, I've never been super crazy about innate magical abilities within a book, but if it's done well, it can be forgiven. So, Mayrad comes back to the man Cadvan, I believe he's called, and they have a fairly unceremonious escape, and as he turns her borderline invisible, which is a bit weird seeing as they spend a while telling you how impossible it is to escape from Gilman's Cot. Sure, being unseen undoubtedly helps and will make things much easier, it just creates this weird build-up and then kind of a whiff of a solution, and it's just like, poof, oh, okay, there it is. So they travel, and Cadvan explains some of the rules of magic to Mayrad. Primarily, he speaks of the speech, which is some sort of magical language. It has plenty of lore attached to it, most of which I won't go into. Suffice to say that it is musically based instead of internal magical power. What I did find interesting is that Cadvan mentions all bards have a true name from the speech, which I found fascinating because it's the same premise that is used in Christopher Paolini's Aragon books, published in the same year as this one. I think both of you had better see me after class, because somebody is clearly copying somebody else's homework. So, as they finish exiting the land, a mountain comes nearly down on both of their heads, yet Mayrad is able to help hold off the mountain from crumbling, even though she just recently discovered the use of the gift earlier that day. And it reminds me a little too much of Rey from the new Star Wars, and I don't like anything that reminds me of Rey from the new Star Wars. But I am promised to give it its chance. What also worries me is that Mayrad has no real reaction in the terms of having escaped her captures, which makes it really, really rough in the terms of trying to empathize and sympathize with your main character. Still, I'm hoping that the fact it's called out as an exclamation means that more is incoming. As they continue traveling to escape the looming power of the land they were in, they come to defend themselves from something rather hideously named wolfwurs. That sounds like somebody with a lisp is trying to name a puppy. It's quite an obvious spin on werewolf, but it just comes off as being very odd and silly for a name of a darkness wolf that comes in forms of shadow. Anyway, they manage to outbattle and outscape the wolfwurs, and while the book simply calls them wurs now, I'm going to be an asshole and not going to let them forget the earlier blunder. They continue through the mountains with the help of a mountain lion that Cadvan talks to. They just glance right over that. And then they find one of the bard schools that hosts an old friend of Cadvan's. Spend a little bit of time in this place, which at first seems to be inhabited only by Cadvan's buddy and his buddy's wife, which is odd because it gives this place the feel of a Minecraft world that is huge and elaborate but inhabited by only a single person, and suddenly everything just got weirdly personal. Anyway, Cadvan decides he needs to continue his really dangerous journey to a place and thinks that it's safer if he takes Mayrad with him. And everyone, including me, thinks this is really, really stupid, but if a character's stupidity were preventable, we wouldn't have had the Season 8 of Game of Thrones. So Myrad ends up going to a great feast, and we see a great deal of bards, and Cadvan and Mayrad play music, which impresses everyone. And they've been studying the gift their entire life, even though Myrad just discovered it. It existed all along. I'm going to call that enough for the Mary Sue Square. The next day, the council officiates Myrad as a Padawan learner and decides that she should learn the gift under Cadvan because of character development. The Force. Feelings. They agree to set off in a week because Cadvan has something important to do, and I still have no clue what it is, and Myrad spends time learning to read and fight with a sword. And while she is Mary Sue levels of clever and optimistic despite an incredibly harsh upbringing, she is relatively bad with a blade, which makes me happy that there's at least one thing she isn't good at, because my childhood crushed Star Wars, took my wallet, cheated on me with Kathleen Kennedy, and I'll take anything that could be considered as character development nowadays. So time goes on, and the bard who is teaching Myrad to read forcibly kisses her, and she attacks him because, she was a slave who had to deal with hundreds of thefts of rapes and beatings, so why the fuck would that be okay? And the book is just sort of oddly dismissive of this whole moment because his heart pines for her or whatever. A, you've known her less than a week. Take a cold shower and some chill pills. B, if she's been through that type of life, you basically need to not touch her wrong until she's dealt with that, and it's been a lot less than a fortnight, so she hasn't. Then they just move on past all that. They stay friends. Myrad and Cadvan begin traveling. Now, often in the background, there's been talks of dark bards serving Lord Sauron. The Nameless One. And we get this weird shift. You see, up until now, the books have been in third-person limited. That is to say, a story told about somebody other than the writer following multiple characters. So then we suddenly shift, rather jarringly, to follow two hitherto unknown villains as they begin interrogating that writing teacher who kissed her. And while it's a moment that could be horrifying, the sudden shift is actually very off-putting. And it would have only been sudden if we'd suddenly jumped to following the teacher, but now that we follow two cloaked figures for several moments before they actually interact with said teacher, but while they interrogate him, we also understand his struggles and motive to try to escape. And it's very, very weird and not more than a little off-putting. It's just poorly handled segment, really. So they continue traveling and come across a bunch of halls, which are basically undead bards. Myrad gets revealed as the Chosen One, or whatever, and kills them all with accidental secret power. Standard Revolution 4E. All things considered, I am enjoying the story. It's just got several very weird beats to it, so I guess take me as a praiser by exception in that the things I haven't mentioned actually work very well. So they travel for a while and come across a bunch of elves that are named something different. It's actually interesting, a little segment, because they have a law where if you enter their place, you cannot leave, and that's how it stayed hidden from the world for so long. Cadvan then convinces them that they will have to leave, because hey, the world will fucking end if you don't, and you'll die too. Then the queen turns out to be this shape-shifting thingamajig, what I can't remember the name of, and it is distantly related to Myrad, stating that if it wants her to join it somehow. It's certainly different, and it's actually a good breath of relief, even if I fear it'll end up giving Myrad yet more secret powers if she does join up with it. Then they camp outside the woods and hear an attack some ways away, and find a group that was slaughtered and left behind only a small boy named Him, who is, get this, also a hitherto unknown bard. I only bring it up because the book makes a point of how rare unknown bards are compared to everyone else, and Cadvan happens to just trip over them apparently, even when he's really busy doing other shit. Then they get attacked again because Him is a thief who stole from a bunch of halls. Then they find out it's actually Myrad's supposedly long-dead brother, which would have had a lot more impact. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Would have had any impact if we'd heard about him from the start of the book, but because he was introduced all of 3 pages before this revelation, it carries all the impact of a clean fart in the wind. So they arrive at another bard castle, and it's revealed that Him is indeed Kia, and they were correct. But more interestingly, that the first bard of What's-It-Place betrayed Myrad's mother and sold the girls into slavery. And for a while, Myrad questions Cadvan because a hall recognized him and he's been called out for a checkered past. They argue, and it's revealed that despite having done some bad shit, he's a good guy because of course he is. Then they end up traveling a little more and have to narrowly escape. They send Him in a different direction, and I believe they set a town on fire? I wasn't entirely sure. Anyway, and then the book ends. So that's all for the first book of the Pellinor series. Honestly, I kind of liked it in the end. Even though there's a lot of stuff to not like, there's a lot of stuff to like. So, if you're into fantasy and all that shit, maybe it's worth checking out. Let's go ahead and take a look at that bingo card. And while we did fill out 2 full lines of the bingo card, we still left a fair amount of space left. So, you know what? Again, I think it's worth checking out. I enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoyed me enjoying it. So, until next time, drink plenty of water, tell your parents that you love them, and stroke your mustache at night.